welcome to the first episode of our podcast, Play, Learn, Lead ECE Voices of NL. My name's Taylor.
And I'm Sonia. And this month we're going to talk about well being and belonging with our guest, Melanie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie. I've been in the field for 35 years now in various roles. I've worked directly with children, but the past few years I've worked indirectly with children. And I love talking about children, so I'm thrilled to be here as your guest.
And we're so happy to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Melanie. So, this episode is somewhat linked to the ECL framework. So, well being and belonging is the first goal in the framework, the Newfoundland framework. And it focuses on physical well being, emotional well being, and also belonging. So, we're just going to have a little conversation around those items. Taylor, do you want to add anything about physical well being? What are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts on physical well-being are that I feel like a lot of people focus more on like the active part of it because people look at just physical and think like physically active, but I think people don't always remember that there's so many different parts to it.
Hmm.
It's how much sleep you're getting, what type of food you're putting into your body, if you're taking care of yourself mentally as well as physically. Um, and I think it's pretty important to discuss all of those different avenues that link together to create a good physical well being.
I think one thing that you mentioned was what we put into our bodies and our sleep.
Mhm.
It it's different for everybody. And I think one of the really important things that we can be teaching children is how to listen to their bodies
Mm.
and how to understand those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, when they're young, we need to help them determine, okay, yes, you really need an hour and a half nap because by an hour before bedtime, you're still really, really tired and you're having a really hard
Mm-hmm.
time. So, just helping them understand what that feels like for them. And Taylor, you've worked directly with a type 1 diabetic.
Yes, I have been working with a child who has type 1 diabetes for about 3 years now. And it definitely has given a new perspective on nutrition
Mhm.
and how it affects the body because um, you're not it's not just worrying about how much sugars they have. It's making sure that not only what the carbohydrates are, how much fiber
You're
is in it.
right.
Is there enough fiber to help the body process the carbohydrates that they're getting? Is there enough protein to help slow down how the body is breaking down the sugars? And, you know, finding that balance of enough protein to the carbohydrates so that when they're done eating, their blood sugars don't skyrocket
Mhm.
or, having too much and, their blood sugars dropping because there wasn't enough carbohydrates there to digest. And something else that really kind of stood out to me over the years was how, kind of like as Sonia said, it's nutrition and how what our body needs is different for everybody
Yes.
because he needs that extra fiber
Right.
to digest and for his body to do what it needs to do. But then you have, other children. We even have like an adult who might have like IBS, where that same amount of fiber that this child is getting
Mm.
is harmful to them
Yeah, good point.
because their body cannot process that much. And yeah, I just found that it really brought out how different everybody's bodies are.
I think too with diabetes, it's really very common. here in Newfoundland,
Mm-hmm.
Labrador, especially. But my own experiences with diabetes is, my mom has been diagnosed with diabetes. My partner is diabetic. So learning about carbohydrates and how many carbohydrates there really are in things, and even those
Yes.
hidden sugars that I never really paid as much attention to,
Mm-hmm.
and how they do impact the body. And like you say, having those spikes happen, then what's happening to the body? The next thing you know, as you're working with a child, now all of a sudden the child is extremely tired.
Mm-hmm.
And without having that awareness, sometimes we might not realize that connection to the food, and we do have to be very aware about what we're putting into our bodies, what children are putting into their bodies, what options are we serving children, throughout the day. Is it heavy carbs? Is it something that their bodies can digest easily? So you're absolutely right. It is such an individual thing, which can be really tough when you're working in
Yeah.
a group setting and you're trying to balance all the needs of all the children
Mm.
all the time. That can be a real big challenge for certain, but it does definitely connect to our physical well-being, because
Yeah.
it does, impact how we're able to be alert, how active we are. And when we're working with children, we know that, their job is to play. So
Yeah.
anything that disrupts that play can be concerning, because when they're not playing, they're not learning. And
Yeah.
they do learn through play. So we need to make sure that the nutrition part is there for children to be able to engage in experiences, so that their brains can make those connections, and they can learn, and they can, grow their schemata, and they can, really fully be engaged in, what their potential really is as children.
Yeah, and you talked about educating them and letting them understand what the things that they're putting into their body, how they make them
Yes.
feel, how they help them to function. And I know for myself, I really try so hard to focus on the positives of
Yes.
food. So even something that could be viewed as bad,
Hmm.
instead of saying bad, um, just talk about the moderation
Yeah.
point. And Taylor, I know you had mentioned you saw TikTok and we haven't found it yet.
No.
But what was that you
From
heard?
my, if I'm
We'll try and
remembering
find it by the time we post.
correctly, it's rather than saying food is good or bad. This mom talked with her kids about the different purposes of the food.
Mm.
So there were certain foods that they're really good for the brain. If
Ah,
you have something like an activity that you're really looking forward to do, um, going to school, you need the food that's going to help feed the brain.
right.
And then there's the other foods that are really good for the body. Like you're going to dance class, you're going to
Right.
gymnastics.
Protein for
This type of
muscles.
food,
Yeah.
yeah, like these are the foods, these are brain foods, there's body foods, and there's happy foods. And that's the treats.
Right.
Like there's we eat them because we enjoy them. They're delicious. But we also recognize that, if we have somewhere to be, like if we do have gymnastics, sure, we can have this happy food, but we got to make sure that we're also feeding the body too.
Right. That balance.
That balance, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that point of, like, we don't want to make children feel like certain foods are forbidden, that we shouldn't eat them, or, that is a good point to, having that moderation and understanding that, yeah, you can have, treats sometimes. However, we do need to be thinking about, making sure our bodies get what they need nutritionally, so that they can
Hmm.
perform
Yeah.
optimally. So helping children understand that, protein that we find in meat or beans or whatnot really does help to build our muscles. So it's going to help us when we're climbing and running. And, I think that makes it a bit more understandable for young
Hmm.
children,
Yeah.
especially, rather than saying no. And when we say no to things as well, like, we're setting desire almost to want that forbidden thing, right? Because we always want
Yeah.
things that people say no to,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't want to say
Yeah.
no. You want to be able to allow that, but again, in moderation. So making sure that the majority of calories that a child does take in are, you know, useful to their body to be able
Yeah.
to, um, help them to engage and be alert, throughout the day during their play, because that is their most important job, right?
Yeah.
But something else you
Absolutely.
mentioned too that I know for myself really impacts me is sleep. If I don't
Yes.
get the right amount of sleep, like I'm cranky, I feel like my brain is like kind of foggy. I do not like not getting enough sleep. And I'm an adult. So I can only imagine children, when they aren't getting enough sleep and not really being able to understand that or understand what they're feeling or
Mm-hmm.
how that really does impact their day. And that's important information as early childhood educators for us to have conversation about with parents, especially in the morning, to ask how was their sleep. If we know a child hasn't had a good sleep, well, we can anticipate maybe they're going to be a little bit off today. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
won't feel
Yeah.
their optimal self because they haven't had enough rest. And as I said, I know for myself, I need rest.
Yes.
I truly
Well,
do.
like even myself, I'm the same way. I need a good sleep,
Hmm.
or I don't function properly, and it's not even just for one day. It's for
Right.
multiple days. Like I remember the first time I was old enough to, like, I'd, grown up, moved away from home, and I had said something to my mom about how, man, like, I didn't get a good night's sleep a couple nights ago, but I seem to be really tired today, and it's 2 days later. And she said, "You've always been that way. That the
Right.
morning that you wake up from a poor night's sleep, yeah, you might be a little bit cranky or something like that, but you're okay." But she goes, day 2, 3, and 4, that's when it hits you.
It's
That's
almost like when
when,
you have a workout, right? And the next day, your
yeah,
muscles are sore, but
the
then the
the
following day, your
following,
muscles are really sore.
yeah,
So it's the same kind of thing that, a
yeah,
couple days later, you're probably really feeling that impact,
yeah,
right? And again, we go back to that individuality piece with young children. Some children can bounce back fine
yeah,
with little sleep. Some, it might take a few days, and
right,
being cognizant of that as early childhood educators and really knowing our children, the
yeah,
individual children, to get a sense of, yes, it is going to take a couple of days before Taylor gets over
yeah,
that bad night's sleep kind of thing, is really important for us to, be cognizant of as well.
yeah,
I think we're kind of going into the emotional well-being part of things now. Really, when you think
You're
about it, I
right.
know
yeah,
when a child is really
Hmm.
hungry or when a child is really
Present adult
tired.
here, same
Yeah.
thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Humans,
yeah.
when we're tired, when we're hungry, self-regulation
It's
is
so hard.
It
hard.
is, you're right. And yet we expect children to do it. But for adults, like, I can be way shorter. My children could attest to this. But if I'm hungry, I know that I don't have the same level of patience. I know that, but for young children, they don't understand that. So they're still learning about what it feels like to be hungry. And are we having conversations about
Mhm.
that? How does your body feel when it's hungry? Do you recognize
Yeah.
those signs? And are you able to label that as hunger? Because that takes time. And often
Yeah,
we don't have those important conversations with children. And I think that we need to. We need to talk about hunger. We need to talk about full so that children get that sense. And there is a definite correlation between, the physical being and the emotional being.
yes,
When we don't
mhm,
have enough rest, when we don't have the right food, or we have too much of the wrong food, it definitely does affect our emotional well being. And it can cause children, especially, to have really strong emotional outbursts if they are not feeling, full or satiated, if they do have that hunger and might not quite have the language to be able to tell us that. So it comes out in these, what, most people would refer to as temper tantrums, but we see these big emotions in these little children, and we're like detectives trying to figure out, okay, well, why is this child reacting this way,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I help this child in
Yeah.
this moment, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not obvious.
And really, there's a little phrase, and it typically goes along with positive behavior guidance, but it's really good for any type of big emotion, dealing with big emotions. Connection before correction.
Yeah.
Love that.
And I love
Mm-hmm.
those. I
Love
love
that.
that little
You're
phrase.
absolutely right. Because
Yeah,
when anybody is in that state of emotional disconnect, how can we kind of come down from that if we're not connected to someone, with somebody who's really understanding? And understanding can come in different forms. Understanding can be quietly sitting there with the child. Understanding can be trying to help them to maybe breathe through something, to help ground them potentially, depending on what's going on with the child. But you're right, that connection really does have to happen, like for a while before we actually talk about the
Yeah.
behavior, because
yeah,
the child's brain is just not in a state to be able to be rational.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And you talk about the the connection with the ECE and the child. That brings in comes into goodness of
It
fit.
really does. It really does.
And we were hoping that you could explain goodness of fit and maybe give us a few tips or strategies that would help someone who's struggling to create that goodness of fit with the child that's temperament doesn't match
Right. Well, I
theirs.
think with, the first step with goodness to fit is really recognizing, the three main temperament categories that we tend to talk about in early childhood, but also not just recognizing it in the child, but recognizing it in yourself. So, what temperament are you, and how do you respond to things? And really, that reflective practice helps us to kind of make sure we're approaching situations with different children the right way. So, depending on the child, how I'm going to respond to a child who's extremely feisty, high energy, versus a child who's really slow to warm up, who isn't quite sure about their
Mm-hmm.
environment yet. Like, we really do have to adjust ourselves. And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the biggest tips is to observe. Observe and be self aware. So, really observe the child, what's happening with their behavior, and not necessarily in any um, stressful moment, but how do they typically sort of respond to new situations? Are they, head first into a new situation? Do they stand back carefully and observe and figure out how to enter into a situation? Every child is so different. And I think through careful observation, it helps us to understand the child. And we have time then to really look at what our approach is going to be for that individual child. You
Yeah.
can't come on
Right.
strong to a child who's very slow to warm up. So if I have a big personality, if I'm really strong, if I'm a very feisty person, I probably have to tone myself down and be cognizant of my energy, my
Mm-hmm.
body language. What am I bringing into this situation myself, before I even try to approach a child? And then looking at each child and asking ourselves, what is realistic? Goodness of fit is understanding and having a realistic sort of idea of expectations for that child. And of course, when it comes to expectations, we also have to think about the age of the child, because
Mm-hmm.
with really young children, we also recognize that their brains are
Mm-hmm.
developing, and we have to understand that and be very patient about that. And this expectation of self regulation when children are, feeling strong emotion, we can't expect that that's going to happen overnight. So we have to have realistic expectations of children, but we also have to be there to support children in their learning of how to kind of come down from a stressful situation, or if they are faced with something that's causing them a lot of stress, fear, anxiety. How am I connecting to that child? how am I emotionally there and demonstrating to that child that I'm present here with you and I'm going to give you my full attention and, really co regulating before the self
Yeah.
regulation. Children have to learn that
Hmm.
co regulation first because we're doing it together. And whatever I
Yeah.
model, the child is going to be able to see and feel and experience rather than putting the child to the side to say, okay, well, you need to control yourself, you need to
Hmm.
calm down, or whatever an adult might say to a child, recognizing they might not be able to do that alone right now.
Hmm.
It's going to take
Hmm.
time for them to be able to learn how to do that. And so, again, that goodness of fit comes in when we have that understanding. And when I really know my group, when I know my group
Yeah.
and I know that one child is going to respond this way, or I can predict often as we get to know our groups, on an emotional level, we're often able to determine who's going to respond in what way to different new stimulus or
Hmm.
situations or whatnot, and maybe help prepare a child that I know might struggle. Maybe we're going to have I don't know, a parent is going to come in and visit our program in the morning and tell a story. Maybe we have a child who's extremely fearful of new people.
Hmm.
And we, talk to that child about this person coming into the environment a couple of days beforehand. We show them a picture of that individual. We talk to them about what's going to happen when that person visits. So we're supporting them in preparing for that. And other children in our group are not going to need all that level of support. So I think goodness of fit is being able to not have one approach, but being able to really tailor our approach to the individual needs of the individual children in our care. And sometimes we lose sight of that, I think, and we have to really remember that in order to really fully support a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I think about with my group, sometimes you respond in just a blanket
Right.
response, you know? But at the same time, you really need to consider
Hmm.
all the children. And I think that in building bonds, building connections, two really important things stand out: responsiveness
Yes.
to develop that trust
Yeah.
Yes.
and
You're
consistency.
Yep.
right. And that trust is really foundational, right?
Yeah.
Once we
Yeah.
earn that trust, and you can't have trust without talking about consistency,
No.
Mm,
right? It's that
no.
consistency that builds that trust. If I am
Yeah.
unpredictable and every time something happens in the environment and I respond in a different way, a child can't really predict how I'm going to respond. But if I'm pretty consistent, every time milk is spilled, we clean it up. Every time sand gets on the floor, we sweep it up. If I'm consistent with how I handle situations, children get pretty used to that. And it does build that trust that they can trust how I'm going to respond in that situation. They're going to trust that they can come to me. They're going to trust that I care about what they want to learn or what they're interested in. So trust is really foundational, and that consistency definitely adds to that trust. You're right. And that attachment takes
Time.
time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
when they attach to us, everything is so much easier because they want to they want their behavior to be acceptable in the sense that they want you to like them. They
Hmm.
look up to us.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when we have that attachment, they're more likely to listen to our instruction because they know that you understand them. And you can't minimize that.
Yeah.
You know, that is foundational really to any relationship we have with children.
Is yeah,
Hmm.
completely. And I know two things that I try and make sure that the children in my care feel is love and security, safety.
Yep.
Yes. Well, if they don't feel safety and security, what's going to happen? They're not going to explore their environment. And
Hmm.
that's what we want, right? So they have to feel secure. But again, there's so many factors that contribute to that security, especially at a time now where we are seeing a lot of children in childcare environments who come from maybe a different culture, a different
Mm-hmm.
country. Maybe they come into our environment and they don't understand our
Yeah.
language, even. How are we building that trust? How are we helping that child? How can I let that child know that I'm there for them and I'm there to help them? Um, but when we learn a couple of
Mm-hmm.
words in their language, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe we take it upon ourselves to even learn a song
Yeah.
that we're going to introduce to our group, and how special that makes them feel and how loved, and creating
Yeah.
that belonging,
Mm-hmm.
which again connects to that
Mm-hmm.
framework goal. That belonging again comes from that attachment and how we respond and create that attachment, and it can come in a lot of different forms, certainly with
Yeah, and
children.
one of the big pieces too, if we start to flow into belonging, is just accepting and valuing and respecting the cultures, right? Like
Right.
when we have them for more of their waking hours than their families do at a lot of the time, when it really comes down to it.
Absolutely.
And if we don't value their culture or and embrace that, then we're risking taking that value of their culture away from them.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. But when we think about it too, like, really ask yourself, when I look around this room when you're with the child, what in here is representative of
Hmm.
your culture?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't see things that represent
Yeah.
my culture.
Yeah.
From Newfoundland,
Yeah.
and I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Newfoundland. Really, though, I mean, how often do you see Newfoundland tartan pattern in childcare? Or do we see even toys and materials that relate to our culture? Sometimes we might see books, um, but for the most part, we're not seeing as much reflection of culture in our environment that we probably should. And with learning about different cultures, there's so many possibilities out there. Having a conversation with parents to see what is important, what can we connect here, how can I make this environment reflect a child's culture so that they do really feel that
Yeah.
belonging that I want them to
Mm-hmm.
feel in this environment. And I don't think there's any one clear cut way to go about that, but we do need to challenge ourselves and challenge our thinking around what we can do to contribute to that belonging when it does have to do with culture and families, because every family is certainly unique as
Yes.
Yeah,
well, right?
absolutely. And I'm so excited to learn more about how we can bring culture in. And we have a couple of podcast episodes planned that are gonna two are gonna like touch on that. That would
Oh,
be goal
good.
2 and goal 4 when we do those ones. And then we're actually going to have an episode on cultural sensitivity and how to
Ah,
incorporate
good.
more culture but in a sensitive manner into your classroom. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
really excited for that because it is something that I can definitely work on. I know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
all can, and Newfoundland historically has been a pretty homogeneous society. So we're seeing this influx of cultures now, which gives this beautiful tapestry to
Hmm.
kind of work from, because now children today are going to be exposed to so many ideas around culture that I never had the privilege of
Mm-hmm.
learning as a young child. It wasn't until I moved away and went to university in Toronto that I really got my first experience of what cultural diversity really looked like. But with children today in Newfoundland, we can
Yeah.
give them
Yeah.
that, and they're so open. So
Yes.
open. They want to learn. They love
Hmm.
trying things. So I think that it gives us a real powerful place in their lives to plant those seeds of acceptance, and how beautiful
Yeah.
diversity really is. So I'm thrilled to hear you're going to have some more podcasts around that, because there is so much to talk about when it
Yeah,
does come to
absolutely.
culture, certainly, right?
Yeah. Um that that almost clues up goal 1. I know one thing that I was wondering about. We talked a lot about regulation and the big
Hmm.
emotions and the connection before
Hmm.
correction. And
Yes.
all while we were talking about those things, it kept going through my head. We are in a very highly stimulating environment, and that
Hmm.
even makes it harder, right?
Good point. Yeah. Sometimes maybe we're not looking around our environment enough to say, should we impoverish this somehow and take away
Yeah.
some of the stimulus? Um, yeah, I recently was able to go to Finland
All
and look
right.
at their education system there, and it was very eye-opening. In many of the programs that we visited, there was very few toys. Very few toys were out. So it was the environments looked
Mhm.
somewhat empty, and the children were all so engaged with what was there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a lot of decision making about what to play with. It was much more focused, I think,
Right.
and purposeful. Um, and there was lots of availability of toys, but they were concealed behind large cabinets. So only the immediate toys were visible,
Okay.
the ones that were in use. And I really liked that idea because, as you say, having a really highly stimulating environment, stimulates the brain. Sometimes the brain, especially with young children, it might get overstimulated. It might not be sure how to
Mhm.
control um, what it's feeling. And the automatic thing to do would be to shut down. The amygdala shuts down.
Mhm.
So then we have to, all right, well, now the child is going into flight or fight potentially, um, because they're not able. They don't. Their brains are just not able. They don't have the maturity, the physical maturity yet to be able to, calm down easily. So having understanding of that, when adults tell children forcefully to stop crying or, give that up, or, how sometimes adults
Mhm.
might respond. And I'm talking from a parent perspective here, certainly not early childhood educators. But often, you do hear parents saying those things without recognizing that, well, they're not able to
Down.
calm
Yeah.
down right now. They're physically not able. We do have to connect. So we connect in gentle ways. I'm going to sit here quietly. Would you like me to hold your hand? I'm going to breathe. I'm going to role model the breathing. Maybe a child doesn't want to. Maybe they don't even want me near sitting next to them, but I can sit nearby and still role model the breathing and let them know that I'm there if they want me. My experience has been that often children do want you to be there unless they're in such a state that they might push you away and then they might decide, well, maybe I do
Mhm.
want you after all, depending on the individual situation or the child. But recognizing that children do need time to be able to breathe and get their brains um, to a place where they're able to function. They can't function, they can't correct a behavior until they get to that calm place. And that does take time with children. So, yeah, I really love that phrase, connection before correction, because it is something that we should remember. And that's an easy phrase for us to think about as
Mhm.
early childhood educators when sometimes in a moment, depending on our own temperament, a child's emotions are heightened. We feel our own emotions getting heightened. And then we have to remind ourselves that we need to be at a good place. Another phrase I like is we need children to join our
Yes.
calm
Mm.
and not us join
Yes.
their chaos, right? We have to be the calm. We have to be the place that they feel they can come to when their emotions
Mhm.
are so big and so strong. And again, connecting to that belonging, that feeling like, oh, Melanie is a safe space for me to go to when I'm feeling like this. I can go to teacher
Mm.
Sonia or teacher Taylor when I'm feeling really overwhelmed. So it really does help to build that belonging, that sense of belonging when we have an understanding of those things and we don't have unrealistic
Mhm.
expectations
Yeah.
of their behavior, really.
And
But
along with
yeah.
belonging is allowing them to freely express themselves. and valuing that individuality, that expression,
Yes.
whether it be their emotional expression, their language, their communication, or just their creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And allowing them to feel the
Yeah,
full range of
yeah,
emotions, good and
Mm-hmm.
bad. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to punch your friend in the face when you're
Yeah.
angry, but it's okay to feel
Yeah.
anger. And it's okay for you to learn how to work through those angry feelings rather than telling somebody, oh, you're not sad. Oh, stop that crying. Oh, you're not angry. Well, yeah, we all feel sad. And I'm sure, as an adult, I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, don't feel sad or don't feel angry. Well, I
hmm
am sad at that moment or I am
Mm-hmm.
angry at that moment. And I should feel okay that I can feel sad or angry, and that full range of emotions, positive and negative, not just happy all the time, but rather as a little person, I'm allowed to feel angry. I just have to learn what's appropriate of how to cope with those not so
yeah,
nice
and
feelings.
modeling those appropriate responses.
Yeah.
I think of an example.
Yes.
A child, we were in the block area, and a child was getting excited, had a block in their hand, and let go of the block. So they weren't purposefully throwing the block, but they threw the block and it grazed another child's arm. And I was scared that that child was going to get hurt. So I reacted a little bit. I mean, I'm a very calm person.
Yes.
So
Yes, you are.
You are.
my idea of my harsh or brash is probably still calm to
Oh.
some. But I still felt the
Right.
need to apologize to that child and say, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to say your name so loudly. It just really scared me because it looked like your friend was going to get hurt. And
Mm-hmm.
understanding we're not perfect.
Yeah, I was
If
just gonna
I
say,
Absolutely.
make
like,
a
I also,
Yeah.
mistake, I can apologize, and that's also modeling.
yeah.
But that self
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
reflective piece, right? That you recognize that, okay, even though, I wasn't really that over the top for my personality that these
Yes.
children are used to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to them it seemed a bit more
Yes.
severe
Mm-hmm.
or shocking because they never see you
Yeah. Yeah.
respond in that way, right? So that self reflective piece, like trying to always self reflect and go, okay, how can I do this better? What should I change for next time? How, how did I approach it? Was that the right way to approach that? Or whatever it may be. The fact that you are self-aware enough now to go, okay, I did react maybe a little stronger than
Mhm.
what I normally do, so the children would recognize that. And I think that that does deserve that respectful
Yeah.
follow-up with
Mm-hmm.
children to say, I'm sorry, and again, that
Yeah.
builds that trust and respect. And, when somebody responds in a way to for us as adults, and maybe it's not the way we felt we should have been treated, it feels good when an adult, does when somebody does come to you and say, I'm sorry that I responded in that way. So we need to, extend that respect to children as well to go, okay, I'm sorry that I responded that way, because for the child, they're probably not used
Yeah.
to seeing you like
Yeah.
that. Right. But again, that self awareness, the reflective piece helps us to just get better,
Yeah.
in our practice and what we do and how we work with
Yeah. And when
children.
they have that trust and that belonging, and they're, like you said before, they're more free to explore their environment and to do their job, which is to
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
play, to learn.
Which is to
Yeah.
play. Yes.
They do.
And they thrive. We see them thriving. And, something else that would help to, continue to build on that relationship is the concept of the continuity of having same educators follow
Mm-hmm.
children,
Mm-hmm.
going from the infant room to the toddler room, especially, I know sometimes in some programs it's not possible, and I get that. But even if it was one person, from the room and allow that attachment to continue
Mhm.
to build, continue to build between not just the child and the EC, but also the
Mhm.
parents. Because some parents, I mean, it takes time to really build that relationship. So I think our belonging could really increase if we did, invest more in that continuity and having
Mhm.
the same ECs follow groups of children
And like
right
you
through
said,
their
it's not
program,
always
you know?
possible, but I
Mm.
know Taylor's in a very
I
No.
lovely position right now.
position.
She's in
Yeah.
the third year with the same group of children.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it
Love
like I
that.
have been in the field. This will be 9 years this September. But now not all of them have been with me all 3 years, but there's a chunk of them
Hmm.
that I have had since they started
Right.
just before they turn 2 and they're about to go to kindergarten. And it
Yeah.
is a whole other experience that I
Is this the first time you've experienced
for
following,
for
a group
that
of
long,
children
yeah.
for that long?
Yeah, cuz when I
Yeah.
it's
I love
it's
that.
a totally different experience. And like you said, it's not even just with the children, with the families as well. And
Right.
like it also helps with the transitions to the new rooms because like, oh, this is a big scary room,
Yes.
but oh, Taylor's right there. And
Yes.
Taylor's right there. And,
Right.
oh, but you
Right.
know, Taylor's friends with teacher Sonia, so okay, I guess teacher Sonia's okay. And okay, and then
Right.
we'll maneuver over to teacher Sonia, and then they move over to the other teachers. And yeah, you just get to know their temperament and how they handle things. And like I have a very different reaction to every single child. To like the exact same thing
Of
because I
course.
know that they're one of them. I can understand, like, from an outsider, it might seem a little bit questionable, but she responds the best to a little bit of sass. Like, if you give her just that little bit of sass, she's like, oh, okay, all right, I've got it. But then somebody else said, nope, they need it to be almost like step by step, point blank, let's go. And
Right.
like, there's some friends where even for the smallest transitions, I don't even try to go let's go. It's all right. This is the task that has to happen. Are we doing it now? Or are we setting the timer? Usually it's, I need 5 minutes. All right. And then that just eliminate.
But you
Yeah.
know each
Yeah.
child well
Yeah.
enough now after all these years of seeing them, respond to different situations. You
Hmm.
have that intimate knowledge now, which is like
Yeah.
gold, really, for us as early childhood educators because you've had all these experiences of
Hmm.
mental observations of these children to really get a sense of how can I best approach this with
Yeah.
this child. And like we said, with parents too, parents are much more likely to open
Hmm.
up more about things if they feel a bond with us and they feel trust with us. And just like children, different personalities,
Hmm.
it takes time to really build those relationships. So
Uh,
it's lovely that you have this opportunity to be with the same group
like
for so long
it
because it really does, I
makes
think,
a
contribute to that
huge
belonging.
difference.
And
And now
yeah,
that I've done it, I'm like, okay, well,
right.
can this be like a 3 year cycle? Like, well, now, next year,
Right. I
I'll
want
go
to
to the
do this all the
twos, and then,
time. Yes.
okay, now move me up and move me up and move me up
Follow
again,
them.
please.
Right.
No, it's been fantastic. But it is going to make when they go to kindergarten just that much harder because like, I
Mm.
had you before you were even 2 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to have a tough time. You'll be
Oh,
crying just
yes.
as
Yes,
much
I
as the
will.
parents.
No question.
Because you're
Yeah. Oh,
attached
no,
too,
very much
right?
so.
Attachment doesn't
No.
happen one sided. We get
Mm-hmm.
attached as well, right? But yeah, it really certainly does contribute to that feeling
Yeah.
of belonging though, right? Yeah.
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 This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so glad that we
Yes.
had you in with us, Melanie. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us.
Oh, it's been awesome. I could just talk and talk and talk with you guys. I think we'd have so much to continue to say, but we'll have to save some things. You have a lot planned for your upcoming podcast, so I'm just thrilled to be able to be part of this with you both. And thank you so much
Thank
for having
you.
me.
We're so happy you joined
All
us.
right, thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So I think it was amazing having Melanie with us. It was such a great conversation. I learned a lot. I'm not sure about you. I would imagine you did.
Yes.
Um, and I know you were looking for that TikTok. Did you happen to find it?
I did. I
Oh, good.
actually found. I realized that there was a little bit of language that I misremembered. Um, where she actually refers to it as good fuel and fun fuel, which at first I
Ah,
was like, oh man, that kind of contradicts what we were saying. But then I thought a bit more about it, and it's like, okay, like not necessarily, because instead of having a positive um, title and a negative title, they're both positive and positives, and it's just kind of how you explain what the foods do for you that
right.
don't turn the fun fuel into a negative thing. But I will put her tag and name in the description of our podcast so that if people want to go and look through her stuff, see if they can find it themselves, and they can do that.
Awesome. I think like we focused a lot on how teaching the children how to feel their bodies
Mm-hmm.
with food. So like fullness and hunger and tiredness. And then I thought about again thirst,
Mm-hmm.
hot and cold, and then how much we actually focus on the feelings of our bodies a lot during toileting,
Mm-hmm.
potty training,
Yeah.
right? So it's not unfamiliar to us to teach children how their bodies feel. It's just thinking about all those other
Yeah.
feelings that we can focus on.
Yeah. And the other part that really made me think some more was, modeling emotional regulation for the children. And I was reflecting on how, while yes, it modeling regulation for the children and helping them learn how to do that and label their feelings, it not only helps them learn to understand their own feelings and how to deal with them, but it also creates a lot of empathy for their
Yeah,
peers, but also, in my experience, with ECEs. Like, there's as much as, we'd like to think that we're always positive all the time, we're always calm, cool, collected. Um, it's realistically, that's not going to happen. And which
no,
I feel is okay, as long as your frustrations and upsets aren't directed at the children,
right, right.
because it's, yeah, like I said, it's realistic, and also just that feeling of, oh wait, grown-ups feel that way too.
Hmm.
And and explaining to them when you're feeling that way, like there's times where I'll just have like a frustrating day, and I'll try to hide my face or whatever, and they're like, oh Taylor, what's wrong? And I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm just a little bit frustrated today. I said, it's not at you guys, I'm just having a tough day. And the more you
Hmm.
have those conversations and go and like label your own feelings so that they can make connection that, oh wait, it's not just me that has these feelings, even though they can see their friends have them, it's not, I feel like it's not quite the same. And so
Yeah,
to model it that way as well, and then later on they recognize it without any help. Like last week, I was frazzled, my brain was not working at all, and by afternoon snack, I was kind of mentally done. And I just kind of put my head down on the table to just take a deep breath. And I felt a tap on my shoulder. And I looked over, and it was one of the children. And he tends to be more, he has a closer relationship with one of the other staff in the room. So when he usually wants that physical, like he wants the hugs and the snuggles and stuff, he goes to the other staff, which is perfectly fine. But he was tapping me on the shoulder and he looked at me and he goes, do you need a hug? And I looked at him and I was like, what? He goes, you look like you need a hug. And I said, do I look as frazzled as I feel? He goes, yeah. And I was like, well, you know what? I would absolutely love a hug. And he snuggled me for a good few minutes. And then he was
Yeah.
like, are you good? And I was like, yes. Yes, I am. Thank you so much. And like there's times where like you notice, like I've noticed in my room happening more and more frequently is like two children are arguing or even somebody gets hurt, and then there's an outside child who will come up and I see you're upset. Do you want a hug? Do you need me to get your water bottle for you? Or do you want some space? And it's just all stuff that we say to them over and over when they have their feelings.
Yeah. And they know.
Yes.
They see our emotions. So trying to hide that, instead of acknowledging our feelings and
Mm-hmm.
validating our own feelings to them, and even asking them for help, oh, I'm just really, really sad or tired. I just don't have the energy to go get my own water bottle. Can you bring me my water
Yeah.
bottle? Just little things like that, just to teach them, this is an appropriate
Mm-hmm.
response. And I feel like you touched on it too, not showing our emotions and not modeling those appropriate responses is setting an unattainable expectation
Yeah.
of how adults feel emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and children will pick up on that and potentially start hiding their emotions and bottling them up
Mm-hmm.
early on, thinking that that's
It,
the socially
yeah, like
appropriate or
that's what
acceptable way to do
that's what they're
things.
supposed to do. They
Yeah. And we don't want
know
that because we know for
themselves. Yeah.
ourselves, even, that when we bottle up those emotions for too long, they're going to come out in big,
Mm-hmm.
scary ways.
Yep.
And they do not feel
No,
good.
they don't. They really, really don't.
No. So, in hopes of finding ways to support appropriate responses for modeling our emotions, our next episode is actually going to focus on self
Mm-hmm.
care.
Thanks so much for watching and being here with Sonia and I, and we will see you at our next episode.